Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the third lunch forum of Next Generation Podium for Eurodelta 2023. We are expecting, like, the registrations are around 100, but we will probably have some more people joining. So 30 participants are here and 10 are with Anne and Alfredo at the open office. So we are around 40 right now, and we wait for some more people over time. I'm Alankrita Sarkar, spatial planner and project leader from Delta Metropolis Association, and I'll be moderating this session for next 1.5 hours. We have a great lineup of different initiatives, presentations for this session, and this is the third lunch forum of the third edition of Next Generation, which is being hosted by Perspective Brussels. Alfredo Corbelan is joining us from Perspective Brussels, so if there are any questions for them, please put it in the chat box. I'll share my screen quickly, and while doing that, please note that this is being recorded and it's being live streamed through YouTube. Is it visible, the screen for everyone? Perfect. So, and please feel free to use the chat box for your questions, or you can raise hand towards at the end of the discussion for more panel discussion, but please feel free to already fill in the chat box with your questions and any other initiatives or interesting facts and figures that you want to show all of us. This year, 2023 Next Generation Podium is being hosted as a part of New York Water Week. Carola Hein is actually joining us from New York, so probably she will be able to give us some insights from there. But the ambition from New York Water Week and the Sure Network for Next Generation Podium matches very well. Both of them are trying to promote the youth and education in the climate urgencies and the design and planning sector. Unlike 2021 and 2022, this year we are hosting this podium in two parts. So the first part is this week as lunch forums by 3 different organizations from Eurodelta on 3 different thematic urgencies. And there are open offices being hosted at the same time. We had open offices in the Netherlands, Belgium yesterday, and Germany yesterday, and today in Belgium with Perspective Brussels. Learning from these lectures, we will be taking the next step as an online workshop on the 11th and 12th of May. So shout out to all the students and young professionals who are joining now to join us in May as well. There will also be some new registrations happening from some universities to join and do the workshop together for the next steps of Eurodelta. So over the last 2 days, we have already discussed the theme of circularity and accessibility in the Eurodelta. And today we will be going a bit deeper into the subject of fluid delta. By fluid delta, we mean the movement of water networks and the people in the megaregion of Eurodelta. Maybe more than better to hear this from the speakers than me, but the main idea is to understand how the water networks can be the element of social and geographic identity and cooperation at the local and cross-border levels. On that note, I would just take a couple of minutes more to just share the idea with you. What is Next Generation Podium? So a very short overview of the project. We have been hosting Next Generation Podium for the last 2 years already, with the aim to provide a platform for young planners and designers to understand the urgencies, get inspired, and share the challenges of the megaregion scale. The aim is to connect the research, academia, and practice and exchange knowledge between all of us to learn together. It has been proven to be a very successful and fruitful exchange, full of interesting and useful ideas from the young partners of Eurodelta, who are thinking towards the development of Eurodelta, developing a sustainable spatial economic vision. We have done that online and in person, open office days, like it is happening this year, with a huge community from research, collaborators from universities, but also practitioners over the last 2 years. And maybe it's also good to mention that the outcomes were also displayed last year in New European Bauhaus Festival, and we are continuously trying to connect these discussions with certain agendas, global agendas. For example, this year we are doing it together with New York Water Week. So that's just a very brief overview of the project. You can find more details and results through our website. Maybe that can go in our chat box already. Shelja will put that in so you can visit more and ask more questions about it if you have. Moving on to the program for today. It's a very packed program. We have 4 different presentations, and it's already mentioned by Annabelle, but today we have a whole woman-led presentations. All the speakers, moderator, all of us are promoting the female power of Eurodelta. So I'm looking forward and interested in the presentation, and I will move to the first speaker already. Maybe a warning for the speakers, I have to be very strict with time because too many presentations are happening so that we can have a good discussion at the end. So each of you will have 10 minutes more or less to present, and then we'll get into a discussion altogether. On that note, I would like to welcome on stage Yvonne Havenga. She is representing Benelux, and she has been working with Benelux over 10 years as a policy coordinator, focusing on bringing the interest of Benelux member states and regions together in the field of climate adaptation, circular economy, and trying to pinpoint the ways to cooperate. She's here to provide us with an overview of her work and the connection between Benelux and Eurodelta. So Yvonne, the floor is yours. I'm stopping to share my screen. And let me put you on the screen as well.
Thank you so much. I have started sharing my screen.
Yes.
You can see it. Perfect. Thank you so much for the introduction and for giving me the opportunity to present the Benelux very briefly. And yes, please do remind me if my time is up. As you said, we want to stick to the program. So I will also swiftly move on to the next slide, putting the Benelux in a bit of perspective. I was just thinking maybe I should have added a percentage on water on this slide, but what I do want to tell with this slide is that we may be 3 very small countries, but we are very densely populated. Of course, there's already 17 million people in the Netherlands. I think it's closer to 18 maybe in the meantime, 11 million in Belgium. So we have a huge population on a very small surface, and yet we are doing quite well with our GDP. I also added Benelux as a gateway to Europe, some figures on transport modes. Also inland shipping is an important one that I might come back to later. Mentioning population and water, I think that this also sets us the challenge of how are we dealing with water in our densely populated Benelux. Of course, the floods of 21 already showed us that, we are running some risks there, but also on a less dramatic level, how are we going to deal with housing, for example, knowing that we are quite vulnerable. A bit of history about the Benelux. Our organization goes back to 1944. Actually, we started as a Benelux Customs Union already during the Second World War, with the Benelux being in exile. Then in 1957, they signed a treaty. Well, actually, the treaty was signed in 1958, an economic treaty, a Benelux Economic Union. Same year as the Treaty of Rome, of course, and you can see the parallel with the European Union that also started out as an economic union, and the same for us. As the years moved on, we also moved away from just an economic union, and just looking at the internal market to also justice and home affairs, and of course sustainable development entered our sphere of cooperation. The treaty was renewed in 2008, particularly integrating these new fields of cooperation, and that's where we are now. So we are a treaty-based cooperation. We work based on a common working plan or program, and every year we have our annual plan, and we work with rotating presidencies. This year the Netherlands has the presidency of the Benelux Union. It gives them the chance to maybe pinpoint some specific actions and sort of spearhead what we should do this year. We are also in our structure very like the European Union. So we have a committee of ministers, we have a council, the General Secretariat, for which I am working. There's also a Benelux Parliament that is composed of members of parliaments of the different parliaments in our Benelux member states. And there's a Benelux Court of Justice. And this Benelux Court of Justice, I will also come back to that, is also there because we can make legal instruments, we can make legal agreements between the Benelux member states. Our main objectives are cross-border cooperation, and we also try to be a pioneer in Europe, maybe doing some test cases, seeing if it works for the Benelux member states, it might also work for Europe as a whole. And we also have this opportunity to do so. It's even stipulated in the European Treaty that we can actually move beyond what has been agreed on within Europe. Often just setting an example. It's never our goal to go against what has been agreed within Europe, but it's merely to move forward as a region. And I mentioned the legal agreements. You see them on the slide as well. So we can have binding treaties, decisions, and we can also make political recommendations. Mostly we are working with governmental partners, but sometimes, of course, and particularly in the case of, for example, circular economy, but also water, we work with others as well. And our stakeholder platform is a lot broader. I am moving on. We are active on a variety of topics, so mobility, energy, fraud prevention, retail, climate, security, and of course a lot of them are connected to our topic of today, water. I'm just thinking of mobility, for example, energy, and there's the obvious one of climate. So as the General Secretariat, mostly we host working groups, trying to exchange knowledge, learn from one another, and see if maybe we can come to more specific agreements and cooperations that go further. For example, do common studies and analysis. We can also organize tabletop exercises. This is, for example, something we have done in the past in the field of climate adaptation. And actually, that was the first time that regional tabletop exercises were organized in the context of climate adaptation. And also there we were looking at the risks that we are presented with. What are we going to do if a massive drought hits us? And the European Commission actually took the conclusions of our tabletop exercises into consideration when they came up with their new climate adaptation strategy a couple of years ago. So there you see we can also try and inspire European policies. More specifically on the topic of today, water. Of course, as a very small region, water doesn't stop at the borders. So we need to try and build these bridges between our institutes and also see how we are going to deal with these risks that lead to, sadly, to damage on a more humane level, of course, again referring to the dramatic floods of 21, but also then the economic damage and the damage that it did to the environment, for example. And we have concluded that although we are still very different countries, that also again makes us an interesting test case for Europe. So we are working again, referring back to the main topics. For example, the break-free fish that you see over there is a very specific project that we did on the free migration of fish. It all seems very obvious, of course, that we can have this, but there's still obstacles that need to be taken away. Sometimes we think it all happens just like that, but agreements need to be made between the member states. Also earlier, on the first slide, you saw that we have a very high percentage of inland shipping. Of course, if the level of in our rivers is very low, that also affects this inland shipping. And this inland shipping, of course, again, is important to get our raw materials from A to B, and that has an effect, again, on our economy. Again, a referral to the floods. Of course, we had multiple exchanges on what happened there. And of course, now the main topic is how can we prevent something like that happening again? How are we going to deal with a crisis like that? How can we assist one another? How can we learn from one another? Of course, there's the obvious that the Netherlands has quite some experience there that they can share. I'm also looking at my time. So maybe looking ahead, this year we are going to organize a Benelux Water Day, focusing on quality and quantity of water. And a dream of ours is to see if we can have a digital twinning of our main rivers. Because of course, then you can play and you can enact scenarios and see where that gets you. Of course, with all of this, we closely cooperate. As I said, we mainly cooperate with our governmental partners, but of course we cooperate with others as well. And there's I'll just summarize them as the river commissions. Maybe to conclude, we have a Benelux Climate Network. This is a website that can be joined by non-profit organizations, research institutes, and there we also try and collect all the information that our member states and maybe also beyond the Benelux region have on specific topics such as water, circular economy, climate adaptation, etc. So thank you so much. I hope I've given you very brief insight on how the Benelux works, and it's already a step up to probably more specific deep dive sessions of the upcoming speakers. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Yvonne. This was really a good overview to start with about cross-border collaboration. Before I introduce the next speaker, maybe just one quick question. You mentioned Water Day from Benelux. Today it's the World Water Day, so we are actually talking about it on the right day. Do you already have a date in mind for the Benelux Water Day so that we all can also join and contribute in that?
We don't have a date set yet. It will happen in the autumn. And of course, I will keep you briefed on the date. Yes.
Perfect. That would be nice. Thank you so much. Our next speaker is Carola Hein. She's the professor in architecture and urban planning of history at TU Delft and is leading the LDE, Leiden Delft Erasmus Sport City Futures program. She has actually been a very integral part of Next Generation Podium for the last 2 years already. So probably all of you already know her because she has been presenting and reflecting on our presentations last 2 years. But she's here to discuss more about the historical insights of Delta, and she's joining from New York with some insights from UN Water Conference and New York Water Week. Kerala, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for the kind introduction, Alankrita. What I would like to add to the discussions, I think you just gave a perfect start to that, is how can we look at this sort of watershed design through time? And I would like to propose 4 ideas, concepts, insights. I'd like to talk about porosity, that water fluid matters, and that's obviously on water days, that's important. It means that the Dutch Delta in many ways, which is in constant transformation, or should be, is also a factor of these fluids. I would like to talk about mapping and then using it as a basis for design. And the question is how far we design, whether water management is the design part, or if we actually have to design lifestyles. Now, what do I mean with porosity? All of these territory that we're talking about is about the throughput of people. It's about overcoming borders. On the one hand, every river has a border and yet it can change. So how do we deal with these flows that are going both in the way of the water and across of the water? And how do we design them? If you're interested in the topic, we did a special issue of Urban Planning, which is open access online on the topic. So there's plenty of literature to start with. Now, I just wanted to show 2 things. On the one hand, the port cityscape idea, where I would argue that we have to think territories from sea to hinterland. So from the ship via the port, the city, its infrastructures to the dry ports that are, for example, in Venlo, all the way in the hinterland, making the point that many of these global flows are no longer linked to a port city, but it's really an entire territory that is being reshaped. It's the territory of the entire delta. Now, from this journal, I just picked one article, which is a methodology of analyzing the edges in the city of Gdansk. And the authors mapped or drew over time the different ways of accessing water, whether we have a wall, whether we have a deep area between the water and the land, whether we have a pitch. How do we engage with the water? And I think this analysis is particularly interesting and important for the Netherlands, where we have so many cities that have to do and rebuild their bridges and quay-walls, for example. An analysis of this kind could be very helpful also for the summer school, in my opinion, whether we think about floating, terrace, slanted, sloping edges or intersections between changing water levels. So I'm just showing you as inspiration here a few more images from that particular article, and they trace this development over time in the center of the city, because how you give access to water will also change the way that you engage, that citizens engage with water. And one part of it is whether we think of water as primarily urban or industrial. And just as I said in the beginning with the port cityscape idea, each of these functions has a different meaning and role in the city or in the port city territory, and means different forms of engaging with water. Now, coming back to the idea of the delta, or the 4 points that I wanted to make in the beginning, I said the delta is in constant transformation, and I don't think I need to insist more on this because you have already talked about also the Benelux. But let me just remind you of projects like Room for the River, but also then ask, where was the river reshaped, through what forms, and where did it not get reshaped, for example, in the port of Rotterdam. So these interactions between ecology and economy are ones that we need to keep on looking at and exploring further. Now, that could mean heritage sites like Alplacer Dam, and thinking about historic interactions, industries that have come and gone, which means that we can look at the whole breadth of what a river serves. A colleague here in New York, Lian Foer, is talking about drinkable rivers. Well, industrial rivers are definitely not drinkable rivers. And if we want at the same time to take our food from the river, to drink from the river, to use it as shipping, to use it as an industrial source, we have to be very careful about how we combine all of these functions. As someone recently told us, Alankrita was on that meeting too, you can eat one fish of the Schelde River and then you're done with your chemical budget for the year. So unless we control on a local basis and guarantee that there's input into the or added value to the local area at the same time then we transport global flows, it will be difficult to go to a more circular approach. So how can we, for example, control air pollution in the area of the Netherlands? There are fascinating topics that we're dealing with, how to not only claim land from the sea, but maybe also give land back to the sea. And the drowned area of the drowned land of Seftinge is something that we are looking at now with a European lighthouse grant called the Bauhaus of the Sea Sails. Now, moving on quickly to the mapping as methodology. And what I mean with this can be very different. It can have a more mental map kind of approach. What do people actually see at the edge of sea and land? Or it can be about understanding how much seaborne transportation, so looking at the land from the sea, matters. And once we do that, and this is the atlas that we're currently finishing, we will see that Europe is surrounded, it's not only an integration in the heart of Europe, but it's also surrounded by port city territories, deltas, estuaries that lead into the sea and that we have to take into account. It helps us rethink the way that Europe is organized. And if we take this territorial approach, this is what we're currently finishing, is to say, how do these port city territories here in the North Sea or here Lisbon are interconnected? What does it mean if a port borders the edge of the land? How far, how deep into the territory can we get? So this is the latest color version of the maps that we are looking at. And we can see spaces like in Hamburg with where a city state encompasses both the urban and the port territory. Now, those kinds of comparisons, to just quickly look at the Rotterdam area, show us that we need to change our approaches, that we can no longer just talk about the port city interface, which might be a very small area in the city which is important, Meerewierhafen and so on. But we also have to look at spaces like where the port borders other non-urban areas or even the sea, to understand how we can think about inter-species relationships on a larger scale. This becomes particularly obvious in a case like Venice, where the historic city of Venice sits just up against the port of Marghera, which is as big, and the port of Marghera, in order to allow for shipping, needs dredging. So the other reason for this whole idea of porosity is also to look on the vertical scale and to see what is happening actually in the depth of the water. Now, this all means that we, in my opinion, need to take water management and lifestyles as the foundation of design. So it's not water management purely as a discipline in the public sector that takes care of getting drinking water and protecting us, but it should be a way of living with water that is present for all people. So it engages all people. So what we've been doing here in New York, or continue to be doing, is on the one hand a series of side events on water and heritage, with the question, how have we historically in the past lived with water? What can we take from their good and bad lessons to design the future? And on the other hand, we are hosting a number of side events called the United Nations of Rivers, Deltas, and Estuaries, with the final event coming up tomorrow. We still have another event today. Seeing the river and engaging with the river as one of the core themes that we should be tackling. Now, in that context, and maybe you can also screenshot the QR code there, we have launched a new publication, which is called Blue Paper. So this design aspect can also start in the way, even how we do our scholarship, how we activate our ways of teaching. So this is a journal of relatively short papers, 2,500 words, 2,000 words, yet peer-reviewed, but highly illustrated, so that we have, a comprehensive way of looking at it. One of the ways that we've been proposing for it is a rethinking of the Sustainable Development Goals as dots on the horizon for a bigger picture of how to live sustainably. The other thing, and I invite you to look, if you're interested, to look at this in the journal, which is, again, it's open access online. We need to redefine what we actually mean with water, because there's many categories to it, what we actually mean with heritage. Again, there's history, there's heritage, there's various ways of thinking of it. And then we can talk about what we actually do mean with water and heritage. Now, so far we have 2 issues out. The third one is open access, available already online, and we invite contributions. So I'm seeing this as an invite and a platform where the kind of discussions that we are having can have a place. And thinking about urban development in this way can lead our students, for example, to design projects like, this is a thing my students made for Rotterdam, or reflections on how to change coastlines. And these can be very concrete projects. Lily Petters recently finished her design thesis looking at a market that's across water and land, or other functions that are across water and land. Or they can be very abstract, to the point of thinking, raising contrasting ideas, and actually helping question what society wants. So I think there's hopefully a bit of thought, material for thought. And thanks for having me, Alankrita, and everyone.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Carola. Thank you so much for joining. And it's also good to hear what is going on in New York right now when we are discussing the same topic here. Thank you for the presentation. I think it is wise to move to the next presentation and we come back with all the questions at the end. But I already see good questions coming up in the chat box, so keep it going from everyone, and we come back to it at 1 o'clock. As a next presentation, I would like to invite Anne de Canier. Let me find you and spotlight. Yes, perfect. Anne de Canier is an engineer and urban planner and works with the Brussels master architect, the Bouwmeester Maitre architect from Belgium. The mission of the master architect is to promote spatial quality in the urban development project throughout Brussels from an independent position. So she will be presenting a prospective spatial study about how to organize a more water-conscious transformation with the built environment in the periphery of Brussels. And the floor is yours.
Hello. Hello to everyone from me. Thank you for the introduction, Alankrita. I want to focus on I want to dive into a much more concrete study we did together with cross-border organizations, the Bouwmeester Maitre Architect of the Flanders region and the Brussels region, and the planning agency of the 2 regions as well. Is this working? Okay. Yeah, you already introduced what the Bouwmeester is doing, so I won't get into this one. We launched, so what I told you is that we launched for the Brussels capital region, so that's very concrete, capital region, together with the Flemish region, a prospective study where we wanted to explore the urbanization of the 20th century outskirts in and around Brussels, and more specifically formulate and test the transformation strategies for some key issues, and water was one of them. It's like more in a very concrete scale, but what was important for us is also we think about water and water solutions and transformation in the non-built area, but a lot of our cities have potential in the non-built area, but much more potential maybe in the already built urban fabric. And that's what we also wanted to study. How could our buildings be transformed also to make part of the solution of the water problems we have to deal with. The first phase of our study was what Carola also mentioned. The mapping is important, so it's understanding in which aspects the outskirts of the Brussels capital region are specific and maybe not just copy of outskirts of other big cities. And since our outskirts, our districts that were mainly built in the 20th century are partly on the Brussels capital region and partly on the Flemish region, we had to set up a cooperation between those two regions to make a shared atlas in these two regions and 34 municipalities to have a better comprehension of the issues we have to deal with and how we could get into more cooperation to deal with them. So that's not the core city, neither the diffuse urban sprawl. It's somewhere in between, and that's what we wanted to set out. One of the issues in the atlas was, of course, the water system. And here you can see how several valleys and several rivers are crossing this territory of Brussels and Flanders. And of course, water doesn't stop at the border. So we wanted to comprehend how this water system works, as well the natural system as the artificial system, because the two regions deal with it in another way. For instance, in Flanders, there's an obligation to separate water sewers, rainwater sewage from wastewater sewage. In Brussels, both are gathered in one shared sewage system. So yeah, it's already not so. It's important to understand where are these differences and where we could find solutions for it. We also wanted to set out that the areas, the districts with a high risk of flooding, where they are, and a lot of them, these are the blue on the blue areas on the map. A lot of these areas are built up already and are in the districts that have to deal with a lot of other problems as well, more like socio-economical data and problems. And then we have the urban fabric in red, which is more upstream, which is built up higher up, and where we could use other transformation strategies. But we found this kind of mapping very interesting to comprehend the difference, because now we have urban legislation, which has the same rules for all the urban fabric, if it's down in the valley or uphill. The same rules have to be respected, but those two different areas have other roles to play in the solution for the water problems. And that's what we wanted to point out with a specific study on one of these rivers, which is the Woluwe Valley. And this study was called the Woluwe Waterland. And as I told you, it studied the transformation of the urban outskirts for the Woluwe Valley, and it was set out by the study team of Fellow and 1010 Architecture Urbanism. Yeah, we all deal with the same problems, and like on many places, we noted in the Woluwe Valley many floodings, increasingly extreme drought, and water quality challenges have to be dealt with. These challenges or the problems are not only caused by climate change, but are also the result of an over-designed water system, a water management system that has forgotten or no longer relates to the territory on which it is built, or neither with the soil on which it is built. So this artificial system proposes one unified solution that accelerates the discharge of every raindrop into the sewer system and causes these problems of drought or flooding. Therefore, this study aims to drastically change our careless handling of water and proposes to better align the natural and the artificial system and to reduce the water runoff. This requires a commitment to capture and retain the water where it falls, and to decouple at certain places the water flow from the artificial system. Yeah, it's important to find solutions also within our cities, because as you can see on this map, Flanders and Brussels are one of the most at-risk areas in Europe in terms of water shortage. To deal with the water issue in an alternative way, we need, of course, to take into account more than we do actually the available soil conditions. And here you can see this is the Brussels Capital Region. This is the Brusselian sand soil. It's important to know and to take into account these soil conditions because they are also very specific. Even in our city, we have like several soil conditions. And this Brusselians, it's the sand soil, so it has a very high water buffering capacity, which means that in the east of Brussels, we can use that quality, but it was different in the west of Brussels where we have more like clay soil. So there we would have to apply other strategies. And then if we apply it to the study area, the topography and the soil composition vary from place to place. And that's why we wanted also to comprehend and to study the site-specific solutions. Yeah, here you can see the Woluwe Valley more in detail. At the left side, you see then the soil conditions. At the right side, more the hydrological system. And so it's important to adapt like the system as a cascade, first collecting and buffering the water high up, when we are still upstream, then infiltration, and only lastly, in fact, discharge, and yeah, preferably on a delayed discharge. This means we need to distinguish upstream and downstream parts of the city. And in this as I told you, for the Woluwe Valley upstream, we have the sandy soils. There we should maximize our efforts on removing pavement and create infiltration areas for water. Downstream, blue on the map is the downstream, the clay valleys. There it's more important to make room for water, restore the wetlands, the marshlands, and then we have lots of gentle slopes in between urban districts, where it will be important to work on a delayed way for the water runoff. So we had like a design team that focused more in detail on some samples and how it was very specific on the districts. Here you can see on the map the blue and the blue districts are the neighborhoods in the valleys, and then the yellow ones are on the slopes. Whether the yellow ones are the dry area, uphill, upstream, and then the green areas are the on the slopes. So the idea was to like set up three distinguished types of neighborhoods: the infiltration neighborhoods, as I told you, upstream, and the flanks, the seasonal neighborhoods, where we should like mainly do buffering and delayed runoff. And then in the valley, on the very clayey grounds, where it's impossible to infiltrate, there it's more like focus on the restoring of the marshlands. And then and what I told you before is also that the study had to aim to mix it in with the urban fabric, where where the study team set out like 6 different characteristics that we see often in the outskirts of Brussels and the Woluwe Valley. And finally, that's also to come up with what Carola told. It's not something. Yeah, it's something we like forgot to link up water meeting with. Meeting between people and link it up with the importance of the presence of water. Historically it was done, and so they also tried to find like new commons, new places where we could gather and meet of in the conditions with water. These are the samples, and so you see in every sample you have we have like seasonal districts, we have infiltration districts, and we have this third one is in the valley, of course, and these several urban fabrics. And then they did like urban design testing. What strategies can we imagine for our built environment? In the valleys, we have lots of quite recently built office buildings, which are vacant for now. And we see that lots of new permits or projects are going on to tear them down and reconstruct like new buildings. But as we all know, that's what we shouldn't do anymore. And that's why here they propose not to, in case of these demolishing buildings, not to build anymore in these valleys, or if a building is still, these are these kind of valleys where historically there was like wetland with some heritage monuments inside and then new office buildings next to it. The idea is that if you maintain the building, to transform them into housing, and if you really need to build up new buildings, to put them on pillars so that in the wetlands we can restore the wetlands underneath buildings. But of course we also have office buildings in the other district types. Here more in the seasonal districts. Here it's more important to like buffer water. So here it would be important to like buffer water on the rooftops or in the underground parking spaces, so that we can retain the water and then make the run up in a delayed way. Okay, I will not go further into the detail of the design exercise that was done, but for every type of urban condition, here you see the 6 characteristics, and for every type of land, the dry land, the temporary wet, or the permanent wetlands, several design strategies and transformation strategies were set out to transform the built environment so that every tissue, part of the urban fabric, could also take up a specific role in the solution of the water problematic. So that's much more on a focused and a detailed way that we launched the study. It's in another level than the presentations we saw before. But for us, it was important to really have a profound comprehension because, we had the idea that some general solutions are proposed, but it's more specific than that. My presentation will end up here. What we didn't do is then, because we're not at the end point yet, but is of course then translating these design strategies into new cooperation strategies and in legislation, and in this kind of work still needs to be done. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Anne. There are a lot of questions coming in, and I also see a lot of relations between your presentation and Carola's presentation. And there are questions coming in about that, but let's hear the last presentation and then we dive into the questions. So the last presentation, I would like to invite Annabelle Houdret on the screen. Let me put her there. Yes. She's a senior researcher at German Institute for Development and Sustainability and is a founding member and representing Bonn Water Network today. Her research and policy advice focuses on environmental and water governance topics, including integrated water resource management. And at the same point, I would also like to introduce Jack O'Connor. Unfortunately, he is not able to join us today, but he has sent a short recording from his side. So we will be hearing that right after Annabelle's presentation. And he is also a senior scientist at the United Nations University Institute for Environment and Human Security. He's an ecologist with research focus on the links between biodiversity and disaster risk management, and particularly for the marine and coastal ecosystems. So Annabelle, here you go, the screen you have shared. So you have 10 minutes.
Thank you so much, Alankrita, for the introduction. And many thanks for the organizers to have us. I mean, geographically, we're not that far from you, but we actually work more on the international level, though not exclusively. So I would just give you a brief overview on the network in case you don't know it yet. We funded it in 2020 based on pre-existing cooperation between some of us. We are locally rooted in Bonn, as you know, on the Rhine River. And I'm thinking in the beginning, Alankrita, you were talking about the relation between the water and the social network and the identity, and it's all linked. I mean, that's what we also saw in the previous presentations. So we have local roots, but we also have a global outreach because our members and partners are working all over the world. So we have 3 university institutes, which is the Geographical Institute of Bonn University, the Center for Development Research, and the International Center for Hygiene and Public Health. Then 3 UN institutions, UNCCD, GWOPA, which I'm not sure you know, it's a Global Water Operators Partnership Alliance, also very interesting, and UNU. We have 2 affiliated to the UN, with the Geographical Institute having a UNESCO Water Chair, and the International Center of Water Resources and Global Change that is also affiliated to UNESCO, and then 2 think tanks, IDOS and BIC, and 2 NGOs, IUCN that you will certainly know, and also the very interesting Water Integrity Network. So you see, it's all about water, but it's quite a large variety of institutions. Sorry, I can't skip to the next slide for some reason. Incredible. After 3 years of Zoom, there's still some things that don't happen as they should.
Do you want to take out the sharing and put it again, maybe? Yeah, it works now.
Here we go.
Yeah.
Okay, so we bundle expertise in research, training, and practice. As you see, some of these institutions are more involved into research, others, such as UNCCD, very much in the implementation and policy advice. And we are linking our work in Bonn and in Europe to the work at the international level. And that is so fascinating, because I think we have very much learning needs from each other. So we can learn from the Global South, because they've been confronted to some of the climate extremes that we are experiencing now, and vice versa. So one example of a really local work is this Bonn water story that some of us wrote in collaboration with the city of Bonn to look at flood prevention in Bonn. And we are only 50 kilometers far away from this Ahrtal Valley floods that happened last year. But we're also doing research and policy advice in many, many other countries. And we're doing local workshops, but we're also present at the New York Water Week. So that's a bit the different scales we work on. And then, I mean, I really obviously can't go into all the topics in detail, but you see that we work on water topics such as integrated water resource management, flood risk management, and then also eco-hydrology, water quality, water hygiene, but then also more on cross-cutting topics such as migration, gender, education, climate, governance issues. And I think this makes the network very rich. We do publications, of course, but we also do training for academics and for policymakers. We are quite present in international debates on some of the topics. We do research projects at the moment. For instance, a colleague of mine is in Nairobi in Kenya, working with a Global Water Partnership Alliance to see the impact of improved sanitation on health. And we have a lot of exchange of knowledge, information, and networks. And I think we all made the experience that staying within our respective silos of our specific water focus is very tempting, but that we learn much more also if we go into exchange with the other organizations. So when we meet, we have speed talks, for instance, of 10 minutes where everyone presents a short result of their work, and it's a great exchange. So I've been asked to summarize some lessons learned. And I would just want to put out to these topics and types of organization. You see that it's very broad, it's being criticized by some, but I see still it as very enriching. Dare to be broad, in terms of disciplines, of working topics, of locations, of stakeholders focus on. Together we are stronger in terms of outreach. We see a great international participation in our events, for instance. We see benefits in terms of local partners for projects and exchange on problems and solutions. But we also see that long-term commitment needs not only dedicated involvement, which we do have, but also funding. So we've all been doing this on top of our regular work since 2-3 years, and are now looking for funding for a permanent secretariat. And finally, as you have probably also experienced, online activities are great and definitely allow for international participation, but we need personal offline exchange. And I think it's the combination of both, which you also live in today's event very nicely, that leads us to success. So that's all from my side. Just contact us if you're interested. Our next two events, maybe just to let you know, is one on the water, energy, food ecosystems nexus that will happen in April, and another one on drought potentially happening in June. So if you're interested in joining, just drop me a note or check our website. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Now we go more into detail and the work of one of our partner institutions, that is the United Nations University. And the presenter, Jack, has informed me, like I said in the chat, that Bali, where it's located, is observing the National Day of Silence today, which includes cutting off the internet for everyone, which is a fair choice, I would say, but not very convenient for our event today. So that's why he recorded his presentation.
Shall I share my screen, Annabelle?
Yeah, that would be great. And the audio also.
Perfect.
Thank you.
I'm sorry.
Hello, thank you for inviting me to speak to you today briefly for this Next Generation Podium event. My name is Jack O'Connor. I work at the United Nations University in Bonn, and I regret that I can't be there with you today, but I'm working remotely in Bali. And actually today they have a holiday called Newpi, where everything gets shut down, even in some cases power and internet connection. So I've been forced to pre-record this to make sure that it gets through and send it to you. So please bear with me. But I'm here today to talk about the Living Deltas research project that we're doing at UNU. And this research project, it focuses on deltas as these complex SESs, social ecological systems, where people and nature are tightly bound in the same system rather than being considered as separate entities. And what we see is that we'd like to think of river deltas as being in equilibrium with their surrounding geographic environment, where dynamic processes are dominating. But what we see is that over time and human intervention, these delta systems become highly modified and degraded until now we're looking at what we call the Anthropocene delta SES, where things have degraded to such a point that the processes and systems in the delta are hardly recognizable from their previous state. And in this Anthropocene delta SES state, the people and ecosystems are now becoming more and more vulnerable, and risk is going up to various types of hazards. And what we want to try and do is encourage more sustainable approaches that can help to reverse this trend and avoid a collapse of the delta SES such that risk becomes unacceptably high. Ecosystem services that are critical are no longer being delivered. We are working in 4 major deltas around South and Southeast Asia, in Vietnam in the north, the Red River Delta, and in the south, the Mekong Delta, but also in the world's biggest delta in the Ganges-Brahmaputra Meghna Delta, which crosses the border between India and Bangladesh. So we are working with partners in each of these 3 countries, in each of these 4 deltas. And how we're going about this is that we have a very transdisciplinary setup. And in our work packages, for example, work package 1 is more focused on cultural heritage and social science. Work package 2 looks more at characterizing and assessing risk. Work package 3 works more with environmental assessment and developing health indicators, particularly in relation to water. Work package 4 looks at the coastal ecosystems in particular and social ecological systems, and looking at potential tipping points. And work package 5, which is where UNU is situated, is looking at the more broad scale policy related issues, in particular improving SDG monitoring at the Delta level. Now, each of these work packages contributes to what we call the theory of change, which is listed here, which is about integrating natural cultural heritage, equitable livelihoods, building resilience, and all towards trying to get to this goal of sustainable Delta futures, as we call it, that can advance the implementation of the SDGs by incorporating each of the aspects I just mentioned. And how do we go about doing this? Well, this is just one quick example of our work. We recently completed household survey exercises across each of the 4 deltas, where we went to visit with local people and local communities, and we ran through a questionnaire with them that touched on many different aspects, from learning about their livelihoods to learning about what ecosystem services they were reliant upon, to learning about their risk perception, what kind of hazards were they facing. And this on the right, it's a bit small, but I'll just explain it anyway. It's looking at how livelihoods are impacted by different natural hazards in the GBM Delta, but also looking at what kind of short and long-term coping strategies in different provinces people prefer or have available. And all of these different kinds of data that we're collecting in surveys like this feeds into the UNU perspective and the UNU work package, where what we're doing is looking to align disaster risk and indicators of disaster risk, and looking at improving the implementation of SDGs. And these 2 things here are just recently published papers on these topics. And so on the right there, we were also looking at SDG interlinkages to try and find out which SDG targets are of critical importance in the different deltas. And this one was looking in particular at SDG 6 on water. And all of this work is going into one of our major outputs, which is called a Delta SDG framework, where we assess SDG implementation. We look at where the gaps are in terms of what we've found are the major issues together in things like the household surveys with local Delta dwellers, so that we can build a better way of implementing SDGs at the local level that better captures Delta sustainability. And thank you. This was a very short presentation, but I also wanted to mention this is not a UNU project alone. We have many partners around the world and within the deltas. And please contact me or check out our website if you would like any more information. Thank you very much.
Could everyone hear? Perfect. Great. So that was it for today's presentations, but I would like to invite all the speakers now on the floor to have a nice discussion on the questions that we are getting. And meanwhile, I would also ask to join Alfredo Corbelan. I am not sure if you're able to join us on board. Yes, I see Alfredo. Alfredo Corbelan is working with Perspective Brussels, and he's in charge of European, international, and interregional affairs for Perspective Brussels, the urban planning agency of Brussels Capital Region. He's the host for today. And maybe to start with that, Alfredo, what is the learning for you today from these presentations, or what is the takeaway for you?
Hello, everyone. We are. Can you hear me?
Yes. Perfect.
Yes. Okay. Because we are here in the open office with some 12 person. So sorry for the noise. Yes. Thank you, Lankrita. What was interesting is to see the different level of actions, and that's why we think that this Eurodelta cooperation that we started within the different regions, provinces, cities shows that if you want to tackle these issues, you have, of course, to tackle it at a level of neighborhoods, cities, but also inter-regional and also cross-border, like we do at Eurodelta. And the different examples showed by the different presentation show the importance of this and the importance of keeping and strengthening the cooperation also at the level of this macro-regional, urban macro region, which is the Eurodelta.
Yeah. No, definitely, Alfredo. And actually, you're right. We spoke about all the scales. We spoke.
I think you are.
Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay. We spoke about all the scales today, from local to mega region scale. We spoke from academics point of view, research, practice, network, collaboration, governance. But at the same time, at the last presentation from Jack, it was really nice to see the international learning possibilities as well. So we are not just within Eurodelta, but Eurodelta can always learn from other Delta regions in the world. So it's a really good overview that we have received. The main question or the main theme of the questions that I'm getting from the chat box is, can we not connect water? Can we not connect all other discussions that we have done through lunch forums about circularity, mobility, and accessibility? Can we not connect all those through water? Can it not be something about more water urbanism, that all the choices that we are making or decisions we are making, we try to take from the water perspective? That's the question coming up, but maybe some of the presentators can already start answering while I get some people on board. Carola, maybe you want to say something about that?
Whether we can connect everything through water?
Yeah.
Yes, the short answer would be yes, and it definitely needed. I mean, there's also a reason why we talk about the water, energy, food nexus.
Yeah.
So yes, I'm not sure how to expand this further. I mean, we've been talking about the fact that water is a system, that we have to live with it in a systemic way, that it's a flow, that it changes. So this means we have to change our approach to it. We can't just believe that there are fixed borders. So we have to find new ways of living. We have to find new words of thinking about it. And that's really a question for all designers. And when I say designers, I don't only mean the architects, planners, so landscapers, etc., but even the lawyers, the policymakers, who have to come up with new frameworks. And I found it interesting. Maybe then I bounce the ball further to Yvonne. You put in the chat that you are dependent. It's my word, dependent on what the nations want, which is, yes, sure. But I see our collaboration here also as a kind of bottom-up way. If we pool our resources and all the different elements that each of us is doing in a smart way, I think we could be very powerful. And what we often, what I fear often is, or see often is happening, how do we make the linkages so that each of our little wheels actually catches the next one, and then you have you have a whole system in place.
Yvonne, any comments on that?
Yes, thank you for passing the ball on to me. No, first of all, I completely agree with you. I think I also put in the chat, I mean, water is so vital for everything. It's vital for energy, it's vital for agriculture, it's vital for mobility, transport. So we need water. And I think you said this as well. Actually, the Benelux, we are a platform bringing our partners together because we are all dealing with the same thing. And as you also said, this is why we need to connect and we need to learn from one another, and we need to make sure that we expand what we are doing. Somehow we always end up a bit working in silos. And indeed, we have to work based on a mandate given to us by the member states. But that doesn't mean, we work with a group of very motivated people. We are also in touch with the directors who are responsible for water management within the Benelux. And on one of the slides, I also saw water and soil as guide for change. It reminds me very much of what the Dutch director presented quite recently. So we have to mainstream this topic as well, as you said, bring it into other discussions as well, going from spatial planning to agriculture to everything, and indeed connect. Yeah.
Great. I have put Katerina and Syed in the spotlight as well, because these are they were putting some questions in. Maybe you can ask directly. Katerina, you want to go first?
Kind of loud in here, that's why I just typed it. Yeah, but my question was related to climate-induced migration, and I guess in the Eurodelta region, water is the main driver for migration and will continue to be a driver for migration, and perhaps in the following years it will be an even bigger necessity. So I'm wondering if part of research that the Forces of Future is doing is if they're looking into that. Yep. And how do they see the issue of migration?
Well, so what I was trying to do also with these pyramids that I showed you is to try and classify, to see the different ways that water transforms the built environment and what we can do with it. So you're picking up on a really important topic, and that needs to be studied. So it's on our horizon. But I should maybe also then say, for example, there's a new call out for Marie Curie scholarships for postdocs wanting to come here. Those would be exactly the kind of topic that a postdoc should be picking up, or a PhD student if there's funding. But I do think, I was talking with somebody yesterday actually here who was telling me so far we haven't had migration or water migration that is water related having led to conflicts or wars. So there's all kinds of tensions, but it hasn't exploded yet. So that's why I think it's right now is the moment to do it, to be prepared, because I don't think that those tensions will calm down. So yes, spread the news. I can also, let me put the link for the Marie Curie call also in the chat if anybody has, but knowing that people have to come from abroad. But I would be delighted to hold someone on that topic.
Great. Thank you so much, Carola. Syed, you have a couple of questions. Maybe you can pick up one.
I am actually, I have answers to most of the questions which I did put up already. But it's just that I have one little comment that, that water is something that's a natural force which is boundless, and it flows beyond the country borders or political borders, which we have already defined. And since Eurodelta very much focuses on one delta, one region kind of a motive, I think this could be a very nice start to, connect the entire region, because we are right now also trying to make the identity of the region, which I think water could be a fantastic point to connect this big region. And also because since the early civilization, this is something that has driven the urban development. I think it would be very nice learning point from each other also to share the resources and connect everything in one team. Yeah.
Thank you so much for that is really the learning for everyone probably today. But it's good to conclude from your end like that. Thank you. Maybe one question from my end. A lot of maps has been shown today, and mapping as a exercise or mapping as a tool has been talked about. How can we use mapping to reach more societal partners? Because right now we are really talking more for the expert groups, for the practitioners or the researchers side, or the students who are in this sector of design and planning or geography or economics. But how are we reaching to the societal discussion? How do they understand the urgency of climate change and water as the main theme, or water as the main connection? Is there some inspiration from any of your projects that you can share?
I mean, if you like me, I can talk a bit about for the Bowers of the Sea sails. We are planning a geospatial platform, which is starting to get developed. Hopefully we have a pilot in the summer, with the idea to layer the fixities, so the spatial qualities of port, city, territories, like the atlas I showed, connect them to the flows, air pollution, life expectancy, education levels, and then add the narratives, the local stories to it. So for the project, we're imagining drops, the Zoab, for example, as a drop. And can we discuss, on the one hand, what happens if we add such a drop to one locality, and on the other hand, to see how the framing conditions would change the impact of such a drop if we compare Malmö to Hamburg to Rotterdam to Venice. So hopefully next year I have something more to show.
Great. Maybe anything from Anne. You're working with the Bouwmeester office. Is there any project that you are dealing with where you are including the societal, like the citizens, in this discussion? Or how are they reacting to this water transformations that you are working with?
Yeah, we recently launched a call for a BMA label for some new experiments where we just wanted to citizens' participation more into our projects. And we selected the project on the make visualization of the lots of sources, clear water sources in Brussels. And the official maps, there's only like 40 sources visible, but citizen science already mapped out like 210 different natural. So that's clear water coming out of the soil somewhere under a building, under a street, or just in a park. And that's going today right into the sewage system, but that's clear groundwater. And so we are just funding a small project on which kind of sources it is, where we could make them visual, and how could we just create a more direct link between citizens in Brussels and the fact that these sources exist, and do like temporary event around the visualization of these sources. Yeah, that's just one of the smaller interventions.
Thank you. Alfredo, maybe something from your end. How is Perspective Brussels working on this subject, connecting the water and society?
Sorry, because as we are all together in the same room, it's difficult.
Yes.
There are different projects as well. Well, of course, we work also with Han and the BMA. But for instance, there is one project related to the canal area in Brussels. There is a canal plan, but there is also a plan for the quality of the canal area, and how it's not only the water, but also all the different aspects of the landscape, including the water, of course, and the access to the water, and also the access to the different function of the water. And there are also a lot of activity coming up also from the civil society to bring also the water accessible in Brussels for leisure as well. Not only the canal is more difficult because the canal is still used as a recipient of extra water when there is too much rain, and so the sewage water is going to the canal, so almost quite often. But there are a big movement here in Brussels to reclaim the water, and also to for instance some lake and so on. So it's a topic which is very much important. We are working as well in Perspective Brussels, several teams on that issue, and also we have noticed. We participated last week at Cities Forum, which is a gathering from the European Commission, gathering different cities. And despite the fact that water was not a topic on the agenda, in the different discussion we had, it seems that this topic is becoming an important hot issue across Europe.
Annabelle, anything from your end on this subject? I mean, you are really a great example the network is really based on the societal connections with water. What kind of inputs do you receive from the citizens on this research subject? Is it understandable for everyone what the researchers and what the practitioners are trying to do on the water urbanism discussion?
Yeah, I think we really, in any research we do, in any discipline we're working on, we need this this connection to the society to make our voice heard, and so that the approaches that we develop can also be adapted, and that there's ownership for the solutions that we develop. So of course, it's a matter of communication. It's also not everyone's business. So I think depending on the scientists, they are more or less able to communicate. But I do think that, and that's what we try to do in our different projects, is to bring people together from the very early stage of a project on. So not to come with our scientist's mindset and said, you have to answer my questions, but go to a country and see, okay, what is actually the problem and where does it come from? And what does this problem mean to you? Or is it just a perceived problem from our side? So first also have the societal view on the water issues, and then of course also understanding the whole normative context around, etc. And then from this, finding a common basis for research and for the solutions that we develop.
Yeah, thank you so much, Annabelle. I'm looking into the chat box last time. Did I miss any questions which are not being taken up already? Maybe somebody want to say something at the end. We are almost last few minutes in the discussion. Any hand raises or any other questions that we have missed and not discussed? And maybe Yvonne, you are working very much on the national, like the cooperation between the three nations. Annabelle, you're working more in the network between these. And Dekania showed us the concrete examples from Brussels, and Carola talked about the whole Delta as a research. How do we all connect with each other and create a better, stronger impact on Eurodelta? How do we really create a connection between all these four sides? Maybe someone wants to step up and say this.
Yeah, maybe just very briefly, I think we need concrete joint interests or concrete joint problems to develop solutions. And we need our hearts and minds, I would say.
Or you might also want to, so two things perhaps. What we haven't heard as much about is the role of art, culture, the humanities. So that might be someone else to invite to the table. And I do agree that we need something concrete. So even if we have one model location or two or three, but some place where what you were also just asking about citizen engagement, etc., could be played out. And I know we discussed this for Delta Metropole, yes, but everybody's involved, and how can we choose one? So maybe it could even be a kind of competition to say who's interested, and let's vote, and then start with year one in one location and move on. But that we actually implement and test and try and develop methodologies, as someone asked, but try them on the ground so that it doesn't stay all dry.
Thank you, Carola. Yvonne.
Yeah, I think it's about connecting our strengths. Indeed, I work on a more policy level, but to work on this policy level and to make an impact, we actually need your input from the ground. And Annabelle, you also mentioned these problems. Yes, we need people knocking on the door of policymakers and say, there is a problem, we need to coordinate, we need to cooperate, and then it's up to us to do that within the Benelux region. So I think indeed we can connect and then build upon what we do best.
Thank you so much. Anne, any last thoughts?
Yeah, from Bouwmeester, we are always very much focused on very concrete projects. That's why, where we have tried to have the impact, because to see positive results of projects where it's possible to have impact, to see the change, it's always very stimulating and encouraging for all the others to try it as well, because it's a new thematic and it's not complex, but it's huge. It touches lots of issues. And to have like good examples that can stimulate others. So I agree to launch competition internationally with good examples to share.
Great, thank you so much. So on that note, the Next Generation Podium for Eurodelta in May will be continuing on 11th and 12th May for the workshop, and we will try to find the focused problem from all of us to be able to knock the doors of policymakers, researchers, and Bouwmeester to find the right solutions. So thank you everyone for joining, and please join us again on 11th and 12th of May. We had a great session. This is the end of the lunch forums of this year. So we probably be in touch and figure out a competition soon. Bye-bye. Carola, you want to say something? We don't hear you.
Sorry about that. I wasn't quick enough to post the Marie Curie Fellowship yet. So please do email me, Katarina, yes. Yes, I put my email in the chat, but only to her. I will redo it, but you are also able to find me. So please send me that, or I send it to Alankrita, who can then.
Yes, we share with everyone. Yes.
We share it. Apologies for that.